All right.
Ian McNaught, take it away.
All right, guys. Thank you for having me. We'll have some fun. So I'm doing some defect recognition tonight and just some pictures from the field. I just want to start off always by saying, I'm just a home inspector like all the rest of you. I've been doing this for about a decade. I have some construction experience prior. But I always like to disclaim to say that I am always learning. I'm always trying to study and grow my skill set. I don't claim to know everything. And in fact, I probably will have some errors in my presentation tonight. And that is life. But I welcome participation. Part of the way I like to present things involves some interaction. So feel free to, I'll ask some questions along the way. I may show some pictures on the screen and ask if anyone can recognize why I've put that picture up. Feel free to jump in and share. Yeah, we'll have a good time. Obviously, my contact info, my email's at the bottom there if anyone would like. Okay, so we'll just, and the other thing I'd like to share is I do have some slides in here that are from a previous presentation I've done with just the Nova ASHI group. I brought some of those back just because I know there's a larger group here, and also there may be some things that we go over that are specifically for newer inspectors, because I just want to be inclusive and include a wide variety of experience. So you may know some of this stuff already, and it's just a refresher if so. If not, great. We'll jump on in. All right. So this is kind of one of the things for the newer inspectors out there. When you see a driveway drain, one of the things I did not do for a while was to check the drain itself. This can be a costly repair, so just a reminder to anyone, when you've got these underground drains or water management systems for your driveway, make sure you shine your flashlight in there and take a peek. As you can see, here's an example of one where the pipe is almost completely full of debris and dirt, and then here's another one where the bottom of the pipe is completely gone. And if you fail to look at that, that's something that can be pretty expensive to cut out and replace. So just remember, when you see those drains underneath the driveway, definitely worth a picture, at least to check the condition. All right. Anyone know what the problem is here with this burner?
Propane in a range setup for gas.
Yeah, exactly. Great job, Lou. So again, this is probably more geared towards the newer inspectors, but if you get flames on a burner with out of control yellow flames, that means the orifices were never changed over. Almost every appliance that is shipped and sold is always set up for natural gas. If somebody has propane at their property, they have to convert the appliance to propane, and that usually involves changing either an orifice, or there sometimes is just an adjustment they have to do. And when they don't do that, you get these crazy flames. So if you see that, it's not normal, write it up. Here's another one for newer inspectors, just to go over mold remediation or fire remediation. If you guys are in a basement, attic, crawl space, any unfinished space, and you see the framing's all been painted white, don't just think, oh, it's pretty, somebody just didn't want to see the wood. White is the standard color for a remediation company, whether it's mold, fire, or something else. So when you see that, be suspicious. Start looking closely, see if you can find any areas that weren't painted, see if you find any fungal growth or charring or anything like that. Okay.
People like to use white with fires also.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially in attics. If you see white painted framing in an attic, I can almost guarantee you've had mold problems or fire damage. And so definitely look closely.
What is that coating?
Is
that a KILS or is it an industry special?
No, well, it depends. If it's a fungal growth, if it's a mold, there's an industry special coating. The name is escaping me right now, but there is a type of coating that's got some kind of fungal resistant product.
Kills?
It maybe kills. I've run across some other stuff before, but it could also very well just be your generic kills. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Here's something that I just wanted to point out to you guys. I used to not make a big deal out of this. Sometimes when you're in your attic, you're gonna see these holes. They're nice and uniform in size, and sometimes there's just one, and other times there's a ton of them. And if you get one or two, it's probably not a big deal. But if you get an instance like this, where in an attic, you see these holes all over, and obviously in this picture here, you can see some of the mouse droppings there. That's just so you know, I almost got burned on this on a home inspection because I put this as just a minor thing in the report. Well, they got a contractor, an insulation contractor, or actually, I'm sorry, a pest professional out, and it was excessive like this, where there was holes everywhere. Well, what happens is that insulation gets saturated with excrement. All right, you got feces, you got urine. It becomes very difficult when you've got so many mice tunnels through the insulation to actually get it out. That what usually ends up happening is they've got to suck all that insulation out of there and replace it, basically re-insulate the entire attic. So just want to cover this because sometimes, when I see the excessive amount of mouse tunnels, I make it a bigger deal in my report, because when your client goes to get a professional to look at, hey, I've got mice in my attic, my home inspector said he sees these tunnels, they're going to get shocked when they say, you've got so many tunnels, we have to replace all of the insulation, and it's to the tune of X amount of thousands of dollars. So, don't tread lightly when you see tons of tunnels, okay? Great. Let's see here. All right.
Hey,
there,
Ian.
got my laser pointer going now.
Hey, Ian.
Yeah.
How would you write up evidence of fire as a defect if it's been remediated in an attic?
Yeah, great question. So I put in my report basically an FYI comment or a major concern, depending on if I feel like it actually has been remediated. But generally, the comment I use is somebody's got a microphone. Feedback.
Everybody, please mute your mics.
What I was going to say is generally I have a disclaimer comment. If, when I see the remediation, if it looks good, if it looks professional, it doesn't look severe, I just put an FYI and I say, hey, look, I see signs of fire damage. Fire damage looks like it's been remediated. It can have been done properly. Recommend you contact the seller for more information on the work that was done, and do any research on fire damage. But if there's sometimes, and I actually took the pictures out of this presentation, but I've gotten in attics and things like that where clearly no remediation has been done. There's excessive charring on the wood. Then I make it a bigger deal and I say it needs to be evaluated by a qualified professional. So hopefully that helps. Okay, here's another participation picture. This is probably for newer inspectors, but experienced inspectors, feel free to chime in. Any idea what happened here in this picture and why I highlighted the entire box?
Flood, water damage.
Yep. Thank you, Jim. So when you guys are on an inspection and you see in the utility room or basement that, about 2 feet up, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, somebody has cut the drywall and replaced it. That means they've had remediation. So you've had usually a flood, water damage in the basement. Okay. They don't build the houses that way with a 2-foot strip on the bottom. So when you see it's been replaced like that, that's a good indication for you to start looking closer, especially in areas that are hard to get at. See if you can find any areas that you may still have some water damage, maybe some fungal growth still exists, things like that. So good idea. When you see that, you go, oh, this house has had water problems before. Let me make sure I check my grading on the outside, downspout extensions, be extra careful looking for any foundation seepage problems, whether it's on cracks in the foundation or pipe penetrations, things like that. All right, I just wanted to throw this in there on this presentation. I've had a number of guys talk to me over the years, and one recent reached out to me. I personally have broken a garage door from testing the auto reverse with my hand. And I had to pay to have a panel replaced because the auto reverse failed. And it crumpled when I held my hand up against the door and it was coming down. Well, it so happened that the sellers of the property that I did this inspection on, they were lawyers. So they said, well, it wasn't broken before you got to it, and we're going to sue you if you don't pay to have it fixed. So I contacted my insurance company, and what ended up happening was they settled, and basically I just paid out of pocket to have the panel replaced. It was cheaper than my deductible. So I include this picture because ever since then, this was probably about 7 or 8 years ago, we have switched over to basically using a 2x4 laid flat on the floor. And the reason is, as you can see with this picture, just about every garage door motor manufacturer says the way to test the door for the auto reverse feature is to put a 2x4 laid flat on the floor, or a 1-inch object, but a 2x4 is about 1.5 inches, so it works well, and slide it underneath the door and let it come down and come back up. I see, Hollis, you put in there, you use a flashlight. So I use a flashlight too. I used a flashlight for the longest time, but in today's crazy world of litigation, what I found to be best was to use what is put in the instructions on how to test it. And here's the reason why. It can fail and it can still break the door, just like using your hand or a flashlight. But if you break the door and you write it up in your report and you don't want to be the one to have to fix it, you need to have something to go back to say, I tested it as it was designed to be tested. Okay. And so that's why we have this picture. I put this picture in reports when a garage door fails. And if anyone ever tries to come after me and says, you broke our garage door, I can point back to the installation instructions and say, actually, I tested it how it was designed. So that's just a little tip for you guys out there. Don't test garage doors with your hand. Use a 2x4 or similar. Okay.
Ian?
Yeah.
The problem with testing it with your hand is that the door is at the wrong angle. It's in the wrong position.
Yeah.
And there's one company out there, guys, Clopay. If the Clopay is still making those cheap doors, they will crumple in a heartbeat.
Yep.
Don't grab them with your hand.
Clopay. Yeah, exactly, Jim. You're right on that.
And Virginia, real quick, Virginia law says you only have to check either the safety sensors, the eyes, or the reverse feature. You don't have to check both. So I've gone to just checking the eyes myself. Thank
Same
you.
here, Mike. I exclude pressure testing and do the photo sensors if they have them. And I recommend that a qualified contractor pressure test the door if they want it tested.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great info. And to somebody had talked about, so do you carry 2x4 with you? Yeah, actually. So what I've done is I've cut like a 4-inch long 2x4, and it's in my inspection tool bag, and it's purely, it's a tiny little thing, but it's just the right, you know, you can see the stain on the line where the garage door weather strip hits the ground. You just slide it right there in the middle and it's perfect. Okay. This is a picture from a previous presentation, but just figured since there's a lot more people tonight, when you have recessed lighting, be careful. You can have recessed lighting that is what's called IC rated, which means in contact with insulation, or you can have non-IC rated. So these cans are actually IC rated, but spray foam is a whole different beast. All right. Spray foam doesn't, you know, especially if it's closed cell, doesn't let anything breathe. It creates a problem with junction boxes not being accessible. And so I was on a pre-drywall and I saw this. And so I took a picture up close of the manufacturer's label and the model number. And then I looked up later when I got home and with the installation instructions, these are IC rated lights, but you can see here, it says not to be in direct contact with spray insulation. All right. So just because you have an IC rated light doesn't mean it's good to go for spray foam insulation. So be careful when you see that, guys. All right, a little bit of brick veneer and adhered stone veneer, ASV stuff. One of the things I'm seeing often is there's this newer product, or maybe it's not newer, but it's getting popular, called Easy Casing Bead. Most adhered stone veneer requires a sealant joint when it meets a transition. And this easy casing bead creates this, it has this gasket, which creates the perfect sealant joint, and it's wonderful. But it's not installed correctly, usually. A lot of builders seem to think that you throw this up when you're installing adhered stone veneer, and it just abuts your trim or your window or your door or whatever, and it's done. But that's not the case. This is not a self-sealing gasket, okay? This is just basically what this does is it takes the place of a backer rod for a large sealant joint, all right? If you go to the company, the manufacturer's installation instructions, if you look them up online, it says you install it and then you caulk it, okay? So one of the steps is apply a bead of caulk or sealant over the spacing strip. All right. And what I'm seeing a lot is builders are installing these things just like this. All right. So it's needed when you have a vertical transition. All right. But then they install it like this and then they're done with it. Okay. So here's a picture of a finished pre-settlement home. You can see this is that flexible gasket material there, but there's no sealant. You know, they forgot the whole point of this was to put your sealant joint in. And you can see here, there's large gaps. So when you guys run into this stuff, make sure you're calling out that it's not installed properly if they don't fill that channel with sealant or caulk, okay? And then I'd just go over again for newer inspectors too, just what I feel is the most important things, the most important detail on adhered stone veneer, which is the transition where you have wood framing over your foundation wall. Remember, most adhered stone veneer does not have a drainage plane behind it. Some of the higher end installations do, but most do not, especially these tract homes and these national builders. So one of the important details, there's two ways you can address the transition between a framed wall and the foundation so that moisture doesn't get caught where that transition happens. My favorite detail is this one, where at the transition, they put a break and they put in weep screed and flashing, okay? Now that's not the only way to do it, but that, in my opinion, is the best way. And here's an example of a builder. They actually had to, you can see they actually had to tear off the stone. This was on a pre-drywall I did where they failed to do the transition correctly. This is right about where the wood framing transitions to the foundation wall. So they had to pull the stone off and install the weep screed and flashing there so that any water that gets trapped behind gets pushed out. This is the other detail, which is not, in my opinion, not the preferred method, but it is allowed. So if you don't put your weep screed and flashing right at the transition, you can run that adhered stone veneer down further past the foundation wall, but you still need to have your WRB continue to travel down the foundation, which most builders will never do. They usually stop it right at the framing. All right. And that WRB needs to lap over the weep screed and the foundation screed. All right. So this is another detail that's acceptable. However, this detail is usually not followed correctly. And the number one issue with this is they usually do not continue running the weather resistant barrier over the foundation wall and on top of the weep screed like they're supposed to.
Hey, Ian.
Yeah.
How do we know if they didn't extend the WRB down?
So Sean, that's a great question. And that's why I said this detail is my preferred method, because with this detail, the answer to your question is there's zero way to determine unless you did the pre-drywall inspection and saw all of the WRB and everything behind the lath prior to them installing the scratch coat for the stone veneer. So Sean, to answer your question, there is no way. You kind of have to just hope the builder did it right. And that's why I don't like this method. You know, I actually sometimes put an FYI comment in my report when I see a builder running the adhered stone veneer past the foundation wall, and they, you know, if they put a weep screed at the very bottom, sometimes I put an FYI comment that says, hey, this installation is correct as long as they ran the weather resistant barrier down and overlapped the weep screed. So, and I disclaim in my report, there's no way for me to verify that because it wasn't visible. But good question.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. So here's just an example of a problem on a home that was recently built. I think this was like a 2019 or 2020 construction. I believe I was doing a 1-year warranty inspection on this. State of Virginia requires a 1-year warranty on their new construction. So you can see here, and you can basically gauge kind of where the framing stops and the foundation starts, usually by kind of where the porch is. Sometimes by looking at the garage foundation wall, they're all going to be pretty uniform, pretty level. So I could gauge based on this porch here that the framing was right about where my black line is here. So that's the framing foundation intersection. And if you note, I do not have a weep screed or flashing transition at this intersection. So the next thing is to look at the bottom. Do we have a weep screed at the bottom? In this picture, no, we do not. All right, so there's no weep screed down there. So that means this was done wrong in both instances, both scenarios. So that's a problem. So I definitely wrote this up as the adhered stone veneer was installed incorrectly. There is no the water management was not done correctly between the framing and the foundation wall. And just so you guys know, the risk is moisture will get in the stone veneer. Okay. Stone and mortar is porous. So the reason why this is so important is we don't want moisture to sit where the foundation starts and the framing stops. And we don't want that, we don't want the sill plate or the bottom plate to just start soaking up water and eventually rotting out. All right. So that's why it's so important. And thank you, Hollis, for putting that in there. I see some people were asking where the details were, and we got some links up there. So thank you, guys.
Hey, Ian, can I make one comment on this too? One thing I'm seeing people do is they bring the WRB down, all the way down. Then they put the weep screed up and then over top of the DRB, and then they tape it with the Tyvek tape. They're like, well, it's taped, it's fine. I'm like, no, that tape is not going to last. It needs to be overlapped. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. It needs to be overlapped. And thanks, Shane. On another note on that, one of my pet peeves, and I don't have a picture for this, is when people use weather resistant barrier tape such as Typar or Tyvek tape, and they use it for flashing tape. That tape they use for, which is supposed to be just for the seams on the weather resistant barrier, it is not very tacky. If I don't know if that's the right word, but it works well for just, where the seams of the house wrap overlap, vertical or horizontal. But when I do not like when I see builders using it for flashing tape or, around windows, doors, things like that, they need to be using the proper flashing tape, which is much more tacky. And there's different brands, but anyways, that's one of my pet peeves. Okay, moving on to brick veneer. So for the newer inspectors, if you see brick veneer pulling the sealant or the caulk away from windows and doors, this one is not extreme, but this is the beginning stages that you can say your brick has started to move slightly from the framing. Here's a more extreme example where your brick veneer in this instance is actually pulling off of the wall, and you may have some brick tie failures. Okay. So brick veneer has brick ties put up every so often to hold the brick to the framing, and then there's a cavity behind it. Well, sometimes those brick ties were not installed properly, or sometimes they fail, and there have been instances where veneer has pulled off of a house, so it can be pretty bad. So if you see anything like that extreme, just know you likely have some of your veneer moving away from the house. That could be a pretty serious issue. Okay, next thing, just before we get off brick veneer, through wall flashing on brick veneer, guys, very important. You're not going to find this on older construction. You should see it on newer construction, where same thing like with the adhered stone veneer, but when you have brick veneer and you have your transition between the framed portion of the house and the foundation, you need to have what's called through wall flashing. And the reason is, and in this instance, you actually can see the cavity here is not filled, but often the cavity here is filled with mortar, okay? And as the water runs down in the wall cavity behind the brick veneer, if you don't have this through wall flashing, which is this kind of membrane material here, forcing the water out through a joint, and there's usually going to be a weep there. What can happen if this cavity where the foundation wall is completely filled with concrete or mortar or whatever, that water that runs down behind the brick veneer gets trapped, and it can cause problems with the wood framing. So be looking for your through wall flashing on recently constructed homes. You're not going to find this usually on homes built in the 80s and 90s and things like that, but on homes built within the last 10, 15 years, you should see through wall flashing. Another note, make sure your weep holes are not below grade. Okay, we don't want water going in. Oh, and a disclaimer, some of these illustrations are pulled from Illustrated and Carson Dunlop and things like that. So I make no claim to these illustrations. Please, if you need these illustrations, please purchase from them. If you need these illustrations, reach out to me. I'm happy to provide you where to purchase from the owners. But here you can see a good example. We don't want, if there's the weep holes are down here and you've got the grade above the weep holes, we don't want water getting in there. Okay. This is funny. Mike was talking about direct vent, and I had a few slides here. Here, one thing to look out for when you have a direct vent, this is a concentric vent. Your air intake is on the back side here, and be careful that it's not blocked. In this instance, somebody put expanding foam around the penetration, and there's a problem there. They're now sealing up their air intake. Okay, so that's not good. All right.
Ian,
Yeah.
it doesn't hurt to run the furnace and check and see if they've got the pipes hooked up right,
Correct.
because it's supposed to blow out the center and suck on the backside.
Correct. And that's great.
Sometimes they're wrong.
Yeah, no, Jim, you're totally right. I've found that a handful of times. That's a great point. So you guys, if you want to really be on your A game, get the furnace running. Maybe ask your client to go turn the heat on. And just when you're outside, make sure that the exhaust is coming out of this port here and not blowing out of this port here. All right. The back area is supposed to be the intake. Okay, time for some audience participation. Anyone have any idea why I threw this picture in this slideshow?
No tray under the water heater?
No, there is tray.
No
There is a
expansion
tray.
tank?
Oh, yeah, there is a tray.
Thermal
And,
insulation too close to the flue.
okay, that's definitely a problem. That's a minor problem. There's a big problem here. Anyone else?
Expansion tank?
No.
How about
No
before the
expansion
pipe?
tank?
Nope. So for the expansion tank, you'd actually, for you guys, when you're calling out expansion tanks, you check with your local jurisdiction requirements, but most of the time they actually want you to verify what kind of pressure regulator you have or pressure reducing valve on the house, because usually you only need an expansion tank if your pressure regulator is also a backflow preventer. So just a side note, don't always call out pressure tanks or expansion tanks unless if your local jurisdiction requires them kind of blanket, regardless, but most jurisdictions require only if you have a PRV that doesn't allow, or I'm sorry, that doesn't allow pushback, like it has a backflow regulator. So
I've never seen a rigid gas pipe serving a water heater like that.
oh yeah, you must be on the West Coast. I'm originally from Los Angeles, and yeah. So on the West Coast, earthquake country, you can't have rigid gas pipe. I'm now in Virginia on the East Coast. That you're going to see that all the time. So, but great. Whoever commented that, these pictures are from the East Coast. So, we don't need to be worried about earthquakes here. But we had someone, Hans. Hans got it in the comment. Oh no, John did too, and Vaughn. So a number of people. So here in the picture, this is your HVAC system, and we have a return vent right here on the return plenum, and we have what's called a naturally aspirated appliance. Okay, meaning there's no powered vent. It's not a direct vent system. You cannot have a return vent within 10 feet of a naturally aspirated gas appliance. The risk here is you could get some backdrafting. All right. When this HVAC system is running and we're sucking air in here on the return vent, you have a strong possibility of creating negative pressure and sucking the exhaust gases instead of going up this nice flue, sucking them out and into the utility room and possibly into the ductwork and spreading throughout the entire house. So here's a closer picture. We definitely have that return vent within 10 feet. That is a major safety concern. Be checking. If you guys have naturally aspirated appliances, make sure you don't have any return vents within 10 feet of them. So good job on the guys that got it in the chat there.
You've also got too small of a discharge line on that extra pressure relief valve. See it up there?
Are you talking about this area here?
Well, yeah, is that another pressure relief valve that they?
No, that's an ice maker line. Yeah.
Oh, that's an ice maker line. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. Again, we got guys from all over the country. So this is, you'll see this typically, in our area, but you may not in your area. Good thought though, because if that was an expansion valve or pressure relief valve, that would be a problem. Okay. So, older home here, same issue. All right. So, this is an old style, return here. This, above the, air handler here, it just grabs air from right here. Well, 10 feet. And, if these doors were closed all the time, and solid and weather stripped and airtight, it wouldn't be a problem. However, they're not weather stripped and they're not airtight, and there's a chance that people could not close them properly. You've got a negative pressure happening here when the HVAC system's running, and it can suck the exhaust from the naturally aspirated water heater right into the supply and put it into the supply of the house. So be paying attention to that.
Ian?
Yeah.
Again,
Technicality. Doesn't the return have to be 10 feet from the burner?
You're probably right. I would have to look further into that. This is one of these old homes. This is probably a 1930s, 1940s home where they often just pumped the return right above the utility closet. But Jim, you may be on point here. I don't have a good answer for that. But
if it's a natural draft appliance, you do have to have that separation. It's only if like induced draft or high efficiency, it's less important. But with natural draft, you definitely want the separation.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's just relying on physics to get that exhaust out of there. And once you start putting negative pressure in the vicinity, within 10 feet, you run the risk of pulling that out of there. So, yep, you're right. Okay, oil tanks. Just for you guys, just be checking when you guys. West Coast, you probably don't have too many oil tanks out there. East Coast, you're gonna have a lot of oil tanks. Number one thing to check on an oil tank is below on the bottom for rust and moisture. Okay, so in this picture here, you can see some pretty severe corrosion starting to happen on the bottom of this tank. And on this next tank, you got a lot of spots here with some drips. And anyone notice what's below the tank? Pretty funny here. Some cat litter pans.
Much cat litter.
Yeah. If you see anything like this, you better put this in your report saying, hey, your oil tank is probably needing to be replaced beyond the useful life. The cat litter is not a good sign. All right. So just for, this is for newer inspectors, you guys running across oil tanks. The number one place to check on an oil tank is on the bottom. All right. Okay, audience participation here. Any concerns with this flue?
Condensation.
You got some condensation, yep.
Some of the connections are backwards.
That's right.
Yeah, your overlap. Yeah, somebody used a fitting. So first of all, they changed the diameter of the pipe, but they used a fitting that basically had female ends on both sides, which is incorrect. All right, so this portion here is correct with the exhaust gas flowing up. you have no chance of leakage out of this joint. But at this portion here, as the exhaust gases continue to flow up, you have your fitting above crimped and pushed into the fitting below, which means you're going to have some leakage out of this joint here. So just be careful, when you're looking at your exhaust flues, make sure that all of your overlaps are correct. You should always have male going into female as you work your way out of the house. All right.
And is that a filter there next to that pipe where we see the little, right there? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's open, it's not sealed. So you also have the return air sucking in those gases right next to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Especially if this is a naturally aspirated appliance. Actually, if I go back, let me see here. I think that's this picture right here. And that's the filter right there. So a number of issues here. You got a naturally aspirated appliance. You got an opening here sucking air in. You got an opening here sucking air in with a naturally aspirated appliance within 10 feet. And you got an overlap issue on the flue here. So totally done wrong. Number of issues here. Great comments, guys. Okay. This is something that I thought I'd throw in there because luckily I caught it. But this was a flip I'm on the East Coast. So this was in DC on a row house where they typically have very minimal working space for duct work. But I just wanted to throw this out there for any of you guys. If you run into your HVAC system and you notice that above the HVAC on your supply side, if they take the plenum and they drastically reduce the size, I mean, look at the size of this coil here, right? And then look at the size of the plenum coming off of it. I mean, we're down to a third instantly. That's going to be a problem. Just be cognizant, be aware if you have significant reduction in sizes of ductwork, that's usually a problem. And in this instance, when I did my temperature rise test on the furnace, I had a big problem here because the ductwork was severely undersized. So what I learned from this inspection when I saw something like this is that's usually going to be an issue. So just wanted to throw that in there. Exhaust on a kitchen hood. This is kind of a funny picture here because they went from I believe it's a 3x10 down to a 4-inch, and then they used a 4-inch to a 6-inch to get back out of the house. It's so funny because kitchen exhaust, you typically want a 6-inch duct here, and somebody just had no clue what they were doing. You can go from a 3x10 to a 6-inch, no problem, but they downsized to a 4-inch back up to a 6-inch. So you're bottlenecking this, which is a problem. Somebody put no flex here. Just so you know, this is a kitchen hood exhaust. It's just for removing, the smoke, things like that. You can use flex for that. You typically do not want to use flex on a dryer, things like that. Anyways, it's kind of funny here. So on kitchen exhausts, you usually don't want to get down to a 4-inch. If you see a 4-inch duct like this, that's a problem.
Yeah, and you can't have foil either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Going back to Mike's moment with Mike earlier, this is a good picture for where a problem is. Notice the building opening here. You got a nice window here. This is a direct vent furnace. All right. And in theory, the intake is this pipe bending down and the exhaust is this pipe here. By the way, those are supposed to be 10 inches, or I'm sorry, it's either 10 or 12 inches apart, which they're not. But there's another problem here in that your exhaust is right by your window. All right. That's a big problem there. Building opening. You can't have it so close. Here is for newer inspectors on a heat pump. Specifically, if you're on the East Coast and you have snow areas, you're going to have auxiliary heat or electric heat. We like to test the aux heat or electric heat when we're inspecting a heat pump. And we put an amp meter on each heating element. And on this heat pump, you have 3, 1, 2, 3. So when I'm inspecting this, I will, if the thermostat allows, I'll put it on aux heat or emergency heat, crank it up to the highest it goes. And the reason why I crank it up to the highest it goes is because some of the equipment you guys are testing is so smart that if you only put it up 5 or 6 degrees, it may only fire 1 heating element. All right. So you want to test all of the heating elements, you want to put it up as high as it goes. So I'll put it up to 90 degrees, fire that heat pump up on aux heat, and I'll check with my amp meter on each wire and make sure we got an amp draw. You can see here, this heating element has a problem. I have no amp draw, okay? And just a side note on that, if you guys are inspecting heat pumps and testing the aux heat or emergency heat, give it time. All right. One of the things that I run into with my newer inspectors with our company when I'm training them is they tend to do this test right off the bat, and they write it up as you have a burned out heating element. And I usually ask them, how long did you wait? And if they don't say, if they say, oh, I just tested it right away, that's a problem. Sometimes the heating elements can take 5 minutes to turn on. All right. So I'll fire it up in aux heat. If I don't get a reading right away, I'll wait. I'll go do something else and come back to it. All right. So give it time. Pressure regulator on a gas meter. One of the things that I wanted to point out here that I see wrong all the time is within 3 feet of a condensing unit or an outdoor unit on a heat pump should not be near a heat pump or a condensing unit. And the reason why is there can be sparks. Very rare, should not happen. But in this picture, you can see the pressure regulator on this is right next to the condensing unit. That's wrong. All right. I'm sorry, the vent on the pressure regulator. It's too close. Could be letting gas out when this condensing unit fires up. If there was a spark anywhere here, that could ignite. All right. So that's a problem. I see it wrong most often on properties that have a propane tank. All right, so this property had its own propane tank, and they tend to run the pressure regulator too close to the condensing unit. But it could be with a natural gas installation as well. All right, too close. Needs to be 3 feet there.
What do you do if there's no room to move it?
So great question, Sean. Pressure regulators have they typically have a threaded outlet on the vent. And I wish I would have thought of that question before, because I would have put a picture in here, but I don't have time to grab it now. What you can do is put a threaded fitting on here and run a gas approved plumbing pipe away from the condensing unit. So they could basically pipe the vent further away, if that makes sense.
Up. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. What's wrong here? This should be an easy one. Anyone?
No vacuum brake.
Yeah, no
AAV.
No AAV, no air admittance vent. All right, so this is a kitchen island. This is either a builder that just forgot to put the AAV, or somebody smelled sewer gases from a failed AAV, and so they just put a cap on it. So for the newer inspectors, when you have an island or a peninsula with a kitchen sink, remember, you guys have to vent your drain lines, right? So if you have an island, the only way typically to vent that is with an air admittance valve called an AAV. If you see something like this, that's a no-go. That's wrong.
Ian, do you say anything about the dishwasher drain line looping down?
I have another actually removed the comments. So Mike, no, I removed those from this presentation unless we ran out of time. Let me ask you this, Mike, though. If they have the high loop, is the dishwasher drain line looping down a problem? Is it for debris, or is it not a problem?
Well, you can sidetrack garbage down, and I've seen them a lot where they're black on the inside from grease and debris and stuff.
Yeah, no, Mike, that's great. That's a great thought. Yeah, you remember, guys, you're gonna have a lot of stuff. Your dishwasher tends to pump debris out and put it into your disposal. If you have these low spots here, you're often going to collect debris and it could cause clogs. So Mike, great point. Yeah.
What about the electrical receptacle on the floor of the cabinet?
Yeah. You know what? I don't know if that was this was ever called out in this inspection photo from however long ago this was. I don't love that. Typically, they need to be mounted in a vertical position. I know newer code is now requiring these to be GFCI protected even underneath the kitchen sink. So yeah, good question. Further study needed on that. This was for the newer inspectors. Just a friendly reminder, before you run a sink, just take a peek at the drain. As you can see with all the water dripping down here, I forgot. And I ran this sink for probably a minute as I was going into the bathroom, checking the toilet, running the shower, doing all my procedures to see if it was connected. As somebody put, flex connectors are bad news. Mark, I 100% agree. They are bad news. However, they are not prohibited in our area, at least here in Virginia by the building code. So I hate them. I would never put them in my own house, but they are being used. And yeah, anyway.
Excuse me. Virginia, they don't approve the ribbed hoses. I know the plumbing regulation code book doesn't approve them because it's not smooth bore drain line.
Yeah, you know, James, I don't have the time to do it now. I dived deep into this so Virginia, we have what's called the Virginia Residential Code out here. It pulls off of the International Residential Code and things like, and all the other codes. When I did a deep dive into it here in Virginia, I couldn't find anything that prohibited the use of these connectors. And I found.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I found something at one point that actually these connectors had some kind of approval at one point. I don't know if it was from the Universal Plumbing Code or the IRC or what, but yeah. Anyways,
I'll talk to you after the meeting.
Yeah. Long story short, I used to call these out as incorrect. I don't anymore, but I hate them. I think everyone else does. Yeah. Somebody said just because they sell it at Home Depot doesn't mean it's correct, and that's great. Anyways, the purpose of this picture, though, the flex connectors are terrible, which we can all agree on. But the purpose of this picture is to remind the newer inspectors, when you turn on any fixture, just look at the drain for a half a second. You can save yourself a lot of headache. All right. I had to go get towels out of my truck. It's frustrating. Right. Okay. Here we go. I wanted to touch base real quick on this flex pipe. This is a water service entrance pipe. I had one of my inspectors recently ask me about this pipe here in Virginia because it said Orangeburg on it. And it also has a fitting typical with what we know as polybutylene out here. So I figured it would be just something fun to touch base on with you guys. So this fitting right here, very typical for polybutylene, which if anyone's not familiar with polybutylene or PB pipe, it's no longer used. There is a class action lawsuit against it. There's problems with it. You should always write it up in a home inspection report. But typically the color of the pipe that you're going to see on, at least for a service entrance for water coming into the house, is going to be blue or gray usually. Okay. I have heard that you can have a black PB pipe. So you should still pay attention to it. But in this instance, this is not a PB pipe. This is actually a PE pipe, polyethylene, not polybutylene. Polyethylene is a great product. We're still installing it today. It's much better than polybutylene. But I wanted to touch base because Orangeburg, you'll see this on some of these pipes. And Orangeburg is notorious for having failed sewer lateral pipes. Orangeburg produced a sewer lateral pipe that was fiber basically glued together, and it is a big problem. But I just wanted to touch base with you guys. If you see Orangeburg on a polyethylene pipe water service line, it does not mean it's a huge issue. If you see a pipe that you suspect could be polybutylene, what you need to do is look for PB on the line. All right. So here's an example. Now, obviously, this is blue Max. Actually, somebody put blue Max in here, but you can see right here where I highlight it says PB. Okay, polybutylene. All right. So this is one of the pipes that we do not like. But don't think if you see this fitting or Orangeburg that you have a bad pipe. This is a polyethylene pipe, and it's a good pipe. And Don, yeah, you're right. Orangeburg is the company name. So Orangeburg made products, made a sewer lateral pipe that was very prone to failure, but they also made a polyethylene pipe that was fine.
Yeah. But when you see that fitting, take note, look, check at the pipe and see if it's been painted. A lot of times they'll be painted. If you scrape it, you'll see big blue.
Yep. Yeah, great point, Lou. So yeah, if you see the pipe painted, and you, especially if you see this big old white fitting, scratch that pipe. And if you can, scratch to get to some lettering on it. Okay, this was a pre-settlement. Just, by the way, anyone know what this pipe here is called? Just
Bollard.
Bollard. Great
Bollard.
job, Sean. Yeah. Good job, everybody. This bollard, in my opinion, so the bollard is here to protect the gas piping and gas meter from vehicle damage, and terrible job. I mean, look at the driveway. Somebody pulling in and out of this garage can easily hit this gas meter here. This was not done correctly. That bollard needs to be right here, right in front of that gas meter. Okay. You know what? I have pictures in here that were supposed to be hidden, and they are not. So I'm going to skip past these unless we run out of time. I had hidden some pictures in case we ran out of time. Anyways.
You got 10 minutes. You have 10 minutes, Ian.
Okay, great. You know what? I want to get to some sewer lateral stuff because that's kind of a newer thing for home inspectors, and I've been doing it for almost a little over 4 years now. Let me skip forward here. Okay, so sewer inspections. I know most of you guys are not doing sewer inspections, and I'm not here to tell you you need to be doing sewer inspections. You don't. It's a great revenue source. If you want to get into it, go for it. There's a big expense up front, and you need to get training. I worked with a plumber in the area that specialized in sewer lateral repair for a while before I felt comfortable. But I just wanted to touch base for those of you not doing sewer scopes, when you should recommend a sewer scope, the signs you can look for so you're educated to protect your client. All right, when to recommend a sewer scope? Basically, any house that does not have plastic or ABS for their sewer line should have a sewer scope because older materials such as cast iron, tile, concrete, asbestos, Orangeburg, they tend to have problems. So if you don't have plastic or ABS, you should recommend a sewer scope. Another time to recommend a sewer scope is any house that has large trees in the assumed direction of the sewer lateral pipe. All right, so that's, if you don't know what a sewer lateral pipe is, that's the pipe that connects the house to the public sewer system or your septic system. All right, you could have large trees in the way, and those are generally problematic. And then the age of the home. I generally recommend any home more than 30 years old to have a sewer scope, even if you have plastic pipes. A home over 30 years old, I typically recommend it regardless. And the reason why is the ground moves and you have heavy equipment driving over areas with pipes, and it can often cause cracks. All right. So additional signs that your client may want to have a sewer scope. A new cleanout installed on an older home. All right. If you're in a house and your cleanout material does not match the sewer lateral material, for instance, here you have a PVC cleanout on what looks like a clay tile sewer lateral pipe, that's a sign that you have problems. And the reason why is they've had to have a plumber get easy access because they have to keep having work done on the sewer lateral pipe. So if you have a sewer a clean out that's a modern material, but you have an older home, like a 1940s home, and it has cast iron or clay or tile or whatever, you should recommend a sewer clean out, or I'm sorry, a sewer scope. Now, the only exception is if the sewer lateral pipe has already been replaced, then of course you're going to have a clean out. But you want to check that. And one of the questions here is, I've heard plastic pipe can be worn through on the bottom. And he was asking if that's true or not in Ohio. In my experience, I don't think that's true. I have scoped many lines of plastic and ABS, and I have never had a pipe wear out on the bottom. Pipes that wear out on the bottom are metal or concrete, but typically metal. Cast iron, you get what's called channeling, where the bottom of the pipe just completely deteriorates, and that's a problem. But I don't find that on plastic. Go ahead.
Can you go back one? That you think that repair undermined the footing at all?
Probably, because it looks like they dug down below the bearing soil around the footing. Yeah, that could be an issue. Disclaimer, I just pulled this picture quickly while I was putting this together because I wanted to show a clean out that didn't match the material of the sewer lateral pipe. But yes, Sean, good question. Additional signs that your client may want a sewer scope. If the clean out in the yard or in the house, a good tip for you guys is when you get on a home inspection, and especially if you're not doing sewer scopes, and you find a clean out, go grab that clean out cap with your hand and see if it comes off easily, or look to see if it's damaged, loose, or heavily tooled, if it's got a bunch of tool marks. If it comes out, if it unscrews easily or it's damaged, guess what? That means it's been accessed often. And what that means is they need to have it accessed often because they probably have a problem. All right. Another sign is if you have fresh or recent thread sealant on the cap, that means somebody was just in there and they sealed it back up nicely. So here is a picture of what I'm talking about. This was on a home inspection. You can see, look at all this tooling marks here. Look at all the scratches. Look at all the damage from somebody opening and closing this cap all the time. When I get on home inspection and I see a clean out like this, I tell my client, I say, look, if you don't have a sewer scope already scheduled with us, you need to. And if it's not with us, you should hire a plumber. Based on what I'm seeing on the clean out, somebody has had to have gone in here often, and that's usually a sign that you have root problems or a belly or something else going on. All right, here is another example on a basement on the East Coast here. I have a cast iron line. It has some modern material being tied into it, which isn't a big problem, but my big concern here was we have a plastic clean out on a cast iron clean out. That's suspect to me. All right, because what happens is a plumber that needs to clean the line, they'll usually break the cast iron clean out, removing it. And guess what? They're not going to put a cast iron clean out back. They're going to put a modern material back. So when I saw this, in addition to new concrete work on the slab, I told my client, and actually you can see my sewer camera here, I said, hey, good thing we're doing a sewer inspection because you may have an issue. This is a picture of one of my sewer inspections, just to show that you should also do, you should recommend a sewer scope on newer homes sometimes. This is a modern material plastic. This is actually what's called an SDR pipe. It's a kind of a green tinted pipe. SDR is a type of PVC. It's only approved for sewer lateral applications. You should never see this pipe inside the home, but you can see here on a fitting, it has completely collapsed, and this is actually the stone aggregate that gets put around the pipe starting to come through here. So I just threw this picture in to say that even newer homes are not, they're not perfect. You can have sewer problems on newer homes. That's a closer picture. Okay, I got 2 minutes. We'll see how much we get through here. Audience participation point. Why did I throw this picture in the slideshow?
Needs a cricket.
No cricket.
Yeah, great job, everybody. So cricket needed. 30 inches or wider should have a cricket. It's also called a saddle flashing. Okay. And just a side tip for all you home inspectors out there, if you took a picture of this and you got home and you were like, oh, you know what? Was that wider than 30 inches? You can Google the dimensions of your standard brick. And I believe it's like 8.5 inches or something. Count the bricks and determine how wide it is. All right, so here's an illustration of a cricket or saddle flashing when you have a chimney chase wider than 30 inches and the roof slopes into the back of the chimney chase. You should have a cricket or saddle flashing to divert water away from it. All right, here's another little fun tip. This is particularly on the East Coast, not for your West Coast folks, unless you have snow and ice problems out there. When you're looking at your soffit, if you see water staining on your soffit, but you don't see the staining on the trim wrap or the fascia behind the gutter. So right here, I see a bunch of staining here, right? But I don't see any staining right below the gutter. When you see that, that's a good indication you have a problem that is called ice damming, which is where water freezes on the roof, and it's usually due to conditioned air leaking into your attic, in particular hot air leaking into your attic in the winter. Also can be a problem with ventilation, but what happens is snow will melt on your roof and then refreeze when it gets to the soffit and cause an ice dam, which forces water to get under your shingles, start leaking through the roof, and typically leaks through the soffit, and you'll see a lot of staining here or actually on the soffit. All right, here's a picture of, I believe it's the same attic here, but inside the attic, you're gonna see a lot of so here you can see frost on the roof sheathing, okay? If you see frost in the winter on the roof sheathing, it equals water saturated roof sheathing, which usually equals ice damming. All right, so pay attention to that. Look for those little signs there.
You wrapping it up, Ian?
Yep, let's stop there. We'll end there because the next thing has to do with roof shingles. So that's a good point to stop.
Okay, well, Ian, thank you so very much. That was tremendous.